Assalamu aleikum, everyone. I just wanted to update you all on my uncle. So unfortunately, he has passed away. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Without a doubt, we come from Allah, and to Him is our return. So for my uncle, it started out with tooth pain, and I think they took his tooth out, and this was in March of 2023. I thought it was February 2023, but my aunt says March of 2023 he started having the pain. They took his tooth out, and then after that he still had pain, and they didn't know what it was due to, so they kept giving him antibiotics. And from what I remember, he told me that he had been taking various antibiotics for 4 months, and they still didn't know what was wrong until finally he went to a different place, and they told him to go to the emergency, like the dental department, whatever, in the hospital. And they told him that he had cancer, because he also had these growths in his mouth, like all these spots. So he had cancer in his mouth, and it was stage 4. I did not know it was stage 4 until maybe a month ago. He had surgery. He removed, so they had removed the growth or tumor, whatever, in his mouth, and they had to take I guess a piece of muscle or tendon, whatever, from his leg and put it in his jaw to kind of reconstruct the part that was removed or damaged. And then his body rejected that, and I believe they had to take a piece from his chest or somewhere and put it in his mouth. This was last year, and I have really bad memory. I just know he had 2 surgeries for that. And then he had to do chemo, he had to do radiation, and then they did another scan this year, and they saw that he had some cancer metastasized to his lungs, so it had spread there, and they didn't tell me. I just knew that they saw something on a scan, and then they were like, we're gonna do a biopsy, and they didn't want to tell us what the results of the biopsy was. And I found out like a month ago or so, month or two, that it was cancer that spread from the original one from his mouth to his lungs, and there was a lot of tiny ones, tiny spots all over his lungs. So when they asked the doctor if they could scrape it off, they were like, do you want us to scrape the whole lungs off? Like, you know, it's impossible. So he had just started chemo, and his chemo was such that he had a port that they put in his chest. So he would go to the center, they would give him the chemo, and then at home, I believe over 96 hours or something, it would infuse, and then he would have to go back to the center and take it off, and then he would have 1 week off and then 1 week on. But I believe he only did 1 week, poor guy. And then the second week that was off is when he had he wasn't feeling well. He kept having fevers on and off, and his doctor took his blood, whatever. They told him he had low sodium, low magnesium, go to the hospital. They gave him infusions. While he was there, he kept having fevers, and even before that, he had pain in his tube. He has a feeding tube. Since last year, he wasn't eating real food because he couldn't chew. And also, after they had removed the thing in his mouth, some of his teeth were like bumping into his gums and hurting him. So then he had to remove extra teeth so it wouldn't like push into his gums and hurt him. So he had so many procedures and surgeries done, and I'm sorry, I don't remember what I was saying, but yeah, so while he was in the hospital, to correct the low sodium and magnesium is when he was having more fevers. And originally, when he was having fevers at home and pain at his feeding tube site, I thought that maybe the feeding tube is infected. So when he went to the hospital for the low magnesium and sodium, they replaced that feeding tube. So we were like, okay, that should be good. But he was still having fevers, and then it turns out he had pneumonia while he was in the hospital. And then Monday, May 13th, my aunt, not his wife, my biological aunt, called me, and I live like 3 hours away from my mom and my aunt and uncle and them. And she said, come over, you know, you should come see your uncle. And I was like, that's weird, because it was like 9 p.m. for me I mean, for us. And I was like, why would she call me at this time? And she was like, oh, he's complaining that you don't call him, you don't see him, you know, when someone's sick, they want people to visit them, you know, come, like. And it just so happened that my dad had come to visit me and my husband and my son because we didn't go back to visit my parents that past weekend. So my dad missed my kid, and he came over that same exact day. And then my aunt said this, and she's like, oh, come back with your dad, come back with your dad. And it was so weird to me, and I was scared because I was like, is my uncle okay? And she was like, yeah, he's okay, but you know, he's hospitalized, so you know, he's sick. But I knew in my gut that that's not a good sign, so I was panicking and I didn't know what to do. I just served food for my husband and my dad, and I was trying to clean up the kitchen and get my kids' clothes ready, and my brain was not functioning. I was wasting more time thinking of what to do than actually doing stuff. And then I was so scared on the way, like my cousin, like my uncle who was sick, his son was calling me and texting me, telling me don't worry, you know, don't cry, and you know, reassuring me, and that meant a lot to me. And also they were like telling me, what's your ETA, what time are you gonna get here, like his wife and his son. And I was so scared because to me it meant like my uncle's probably gonna pass away soon. Like this just spiraled out of nowhere, it just got so bad. And yeah, I got there like 1:33 a.m. or something. And before that, when I was still in my city, before I left, I FaceTimed him by my car with my husband, and I told him I love you. And he had a big oxygen mask, and even though it was hard for him to talk and breathe, he yelled back, me too, like he put force into it so I could hear him. And then when I was in the car, my cousin or someone FaceTimed me because I think they were afraid my uncle was gonna die. So I FaceTimed him in the car, and I told him don't talk because I didn't want him to go through any difficulties, and I was like emotional, so I just hung up, and I didn't have good connection on the way. And then when I got to the hospital, I couldn't believe like the scene that I was seeing, how he was in his bed and the oxygen mask and everyone around him. And I just like kissed his hand, and I like touched his hair. His hair was so soft, and he was trying to talk and ask me about my kid and my husband and stuff, and I was like, please be quiet, like don't put pressure on yourself. And then around 4 a.m. is when I went home, because I guess my kid woke up around 2:30. He was downstairs in the car with my dad. He had fallen asleep on the way, and I had to go home and put him to sleep. And when I went home, I didn't sleep at all. Even the day before, I hadn't slept because my kid had some stomach ache or something. He was screaming all night, so I'd slept from 7 a.m. to like 11 a.m. And then that same night is when I had to go back to my family. When I went home, I put my kids to sleep. I was up all day. I took an hour and 20-minute nap probably, and that's when I rolled over and I checked my phone, and it was a call from my aunt's husband, like my mom's sister's husband. And he said, oh, tell your dad to come to the hospital to see your uncle. And then I was like, okay. So weird, because my dad was there with me the whole time, but he didn't get to see my uncle because he was down with my kid. And then when I was going downstairs, I was like, hey, you want to go upstairs to see my uncle? And he was like, is he awake? I'm like, no, he's asleep, because he was, after I went there and I saw him, he just went to sleep. He was very like labored breathing, and he would get up to urinate and stuff, but he was still asleep. Like he wasn't sitting there and talking to us and stuff. He had a sedative drip and antibiotics, so you know, pain relief, so he was sleepy. The fact that my aunt's husband said tell your dad to come, I didn't like that. And then my mom took the phone from my uncle, and she spoke to me. She's like, give the phone to your dad. I took it to him. He was like asleep because he had just come home after driving so far from my house to the hospital, and then waiting there for me a couple hours and coming home. And he hadn't slept. He wanted to sleep at my house that night, but he didn't know this was going to happen, subhanallah. But it was great that he got to bring me. So when I went to wake him up, my mom's like, is the phone on speaker? He's half asleep, so he's like, whatever. And she thought he said. So then my dad's like, whatever. And my mom thought it's not on speaker, so she's like, come see my brother and then also talk to the people, meaning the masjid, funeral home, whatever. And that's how I knew that that's where my uncle's going. So when I was there a couple hours prior, his heart rate was like 111, 113 all the time. His oxygen was in the 70s, and then it was in the 60s. I saw it drop to 50s at some point, but it was mainly around 68. And I knew that less than 70 is life-threatening. and I believe less than 85 is when you start having brain damage and damage to your organs because you're not getting enough oxygen to them. And there were times where it was going back up to 80, 90, whatever. It was weird. I guess it was because of the high flow oxygen that they had attached to him. And you know, my dad went, and then the plan was that after he sees him, he's gonna come home and then he'll stay with my baby, and then I'll go see my uncle. But my dad went there and he read a couple juz Quran for him, and then basically my cousin's wife, not the one whose father is passing away, not that cousin, my other one from my aunt's side, she was like, hey, I want you to be here, I'll come pick you up, I'll bring you here. And then turns out the family was like, no, 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 you have to go pick up your kids, it's gonna be late, let her dad go home and then she can come. With all of that time being wasted, by the time my dad came home, and he took so long for some reason, I was at home when my uncle passed away, less than 12 hours after I had first arrived at the hospital. So he passed away 1:26 p.m. on May 14th, and we used to live in the same building. So, you know, leaving the building and leaving in the car out of the garage, I just was like sobbing, because I was like, okay, he left this garage in his car going to the hospital thinking he's just going to treat his low electrolytes, but he's never coming back anymore. And it was so difficult for me to drive to the hospital. It was like 30 minutes away, and I was having like a panic attack in the car. And when I was at home the previous night, and they were saying like, oh, you can come tomorrow, it's okay, like you don't have to come tonight. They were telling my dad, yeah, you can sleep over and come tomorrow in the morning, and then come to the hospital and bring your wife and your daughter. And I was like, why couldn't they just be straight up and be honest and say like, he's not doing good, just come right now? Then I wouldn't have even put the food out for them. Like, I didn't eat, but I would just rush out, you know. And then they were saying like, for my mom, like, because she stresses a lot and she's not doing the best health wise, like, oh, don't tell her, and we'll just, you know, once I go home and sleep over in the morning, like Tuesday morning, I could just be like, hey mom, let's go to the hospital and visit my uncle, without telling her that I went straight to the hospital on Monday night. And I was like, no, because what if he passes away Monday night and she doesn't get to see him, and then Tuesday I just take her and he's already dead? Like, what is wrong with you people? I'm not gonna take that chance. She's gonna be so upset. So at that time, when I was on the way, I kept insisting, like, I was telling my cousin, yo, can you get someone to go pick my mom up and bring her to the hospital, because I don't want her to have any regrets. She didn't know about this cancer coming back the second time around. She didn't know about the metastasis. She asked about the biopsy, and then he was like, oh no, we're not doing a biopsy, don't worry about it. Oh yeah, he also had a mass in his chest wall. So he started to act as though that's the only thing he has, and he's like, oh, you know, a little thing grew on my chest, we're just gonna remove it, there's no point in doing a biopsy, don't worry about it. Meanwhile, my mom was referring to the thing that he told her earlier about the spots on his lungs. I guess at that time my uncle didn't think it was gonna be something bad when he told her, and then when he realized it's bad, he didn't want her to worry, so he tried to take it back. And you know, it's just, life will never be the same. Like, he was such a good guy. He was 58 years old, you know, gonna turn 59 in a few months. From the time I was young, he was always playing with us. He was always holding our hands so we could learn how to walk. Like, he did the same thing with my kid. He would play with us. I remember, like, he would like have an object and like pretend he's throwing it, and then we'd be running around looking for it, and we thought like, wow, he's doing some magic trick, where did it go? But obviously he would be throwing it backwards and we wouldn't know. And you know, I just have like very good memories of him, and I just feel guilty that from the start, like when he had pain and everything, like I should have been more proactive. I should have found him like a good doctor. Like, why was he taking antibiotics for months and they didn't know what was going on? And I should have known better. Like, I even saw the spots in his mouth, but by the time I saw it, it was like July 5th, 2023, and by that point he already knew he had cancer. They knew he had cancer in June something, mid-June of 2023, and they didn't tell me. They didn't tell us. They told everyone else except my mom and her other sister and me. Just us three. All my other cousins and everyone else knew. And I only found out after his surgery, where they like cut his mouth to take the tumor out and whatever. That was July, I think it was July 17, 2023. My aunt just said, hey, we're at the hospital, your uncle had surgery, come. And I went, and then when I went, my uncle's wife, my aunt, I was like, what's going on, what is this? And she's like, you know, he has cancer. And then I had a panic attack and it was bad. So I think because of that, they knew from the start that I was emotional and sensitive and caring. But I think after that, they were really like, okay, we're gonna try not to tell her anything, especially considering my health issues and how it's not good for me to be stressed out. So I feel like with this video, I'm sorry that I'm being emotional and just all over the place. It's just, I kind of have bad memory and I don't want to forget these little details. That's why I'm just throwing whatever I can remember out there, because I don't know. I mean, I know like feelings are fresh now, the wound is fresh and this is how we feel, but as time goes on, everyone gets busy in their lives, and the person that's really gonna feel it the most is my aunt, meaning like his wife. And I think after her is my mom, because my mom and my uncle were very close, and I think they loved each other a lot, and I think she was probably his favorite sister. And I'm not saying he doesn't love his other sister. Like my aunt is a very nice lady, and you know, but you know, like you can tell when people really who they favor and stuff. What brings me peace now is that, you know, everyone keeps saying, oh yeah, he's not in pain anymore, he's not in pain anymore. Yeah, but like, I guess my whole struggle was I wish he was never in pain to begin with, or I wish I did more to kind of get to the bottom of it. And I didn't know it was stage 4 until recently. The way they were acting was like he was gonna get through this, like he got through other health issues before. But I think that was them just being positive and probably trying to keep us strong. Meanwhile, they maybe knew what was gonna happen. So yeah, from what I hear, he was very happy with me. Supposedly I was his favorite niece. And a few days before that, I believe the Friday before, so like 4 days before he passed away, I was on the phone with him and he told me like, oh, you know, your uncle, like my other relative, my aunt's husband, he was comparing you and his daughter. And I told him, like, don't compare them. She did so much for me. She went with me on my appointments. She went with me on my walks. She came and, you know, helped me with my feeding tube, like putting the food in my tube. She was always there to answer my questions about medications, pick medications up for me from the pharmacy and stuff like that. And your daughter, on the other hand, your wife probably would force her to just text me once in a while, and this niece, meaning me, would check up on me all the time. She would call me 3 times a day. I was like, what are you talking about? I never called you 3 times a day. But, you know, from everyone, like his wife and his daughter-in-law, I'm hearing that, oh, you were his favorite. And I guess it just makes me feel better, not because I want to be considered better than anyone else, but because I just feel a little guilty that I feel stupid that I didn't do more in the earlier stages, or I didn't raise my eyebrow at everything that was going on, and I kind of just like went along with it, you know. But I realized at the end of the day that this is what was written for him. This was his nasib, and that's it. I just have peace knowing that he's happy with me that he's probably in barzakh right now and able to talk to his parents and to his in-laws and update them. Yeah, so I'm just happy that he's probably in barzakh, inshallah, and able to talk to his parents and his in-laws, who I grew up with them. They were like my grandparents as well, and update them on this world and everyone here and things like that. And he doesn't have pain anymore, and you know, it is what it is. I guess he had like 11 months from his diagnosis, and I'm sure he was a man who read a lot of Quran and who prayed to Salah and always advised everyone to do what's right Islamically. So inshallah he had enough time to repent, and I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens up his grave for him, protects him from azab al-qabr, and grants him Jannatul Firdaus, and also rewards my aunt for everything that she went through with him, because it's not easy when your partner is going through something like that. She's the one who was living with him. She was the one who was dealing with his mood swings because he had a lot of pain, and sometimes he would lash out on her, and he would admit to me that, you know, he feels bad and he hopes that Allah forgives him for that. But obviously, as long as she forgives him, he's fine, and she has forgiven him, or did. Even at that time, she was never angry because she knows he was in so much pain. And you know, I just pray that Allah gives my aunt sabr, and my cousin, I know he's young and he has his own life, he's married, you know, inshallah he's gonna be busy with work and everything. I really pray for him as well, but really for my aunt, his wife, and my mom, I guess, because she is gonna sit at home and think about everything and eat herself up inside. She was even telling me, oh, I should have visited him more. I didn't go because I was thinking he's in pain, I want him to rest, I don't want to bother him. And I feel the same way, because I kept making, I guess, excuses. It wasn't excuses, it's not like I didn't want to go to him, but I was like, oh, if I go, my kid is gonna cry, because my kid just sometimes doesn't want to be around other people, and I don't want him to feel uncomfortable, because if I were sick, I don't want some kid like screaming around me, because I don't have patience, I don't have energy, I just want to be left alone, or like be with adults, not kids who are going to drive me crazy. But I am happy that my husband made me go to his house 10 days before he passed away. My aunt and my other aunt and uncle, my biological aunt and her husband, they came from a trip, and their luggage was, my biological aunt and her husband came over to my uncle's house, and they were telling my mom to come over. So then my husband walked her up to their house. We're in the same building, and I was like, I don't want to come because I don't want to bother him with the baby. And so my husband was like, just come, like stop, just shush. And I didn't want to, because I didn't want to be a burden. And I just told my husband the other day, I was like, thank you so much for forcing me to go there, because that's my last memory of him, is how he was playing with my kid. Like, he'd tap him on his shoulder, and when my kid turned around, he would run away and just act like it wasn't him. And eventually got to the point where my kid wanted to share his pistachio or blueberries or whatever with my uncle. He was like trying to put it in his mouth, and it was cute, it was nice. And my uncle told his wife, my aunt, to bring the book that you got him in the car. So I mean, it was nice. That's the last, I guess, experience we had with them before he got hospitalized, and then I saw him in that situation. So I guess the whole point in this video is, life is short, do your best. The most important thing is worship Allah, do the right thing Islamically, don't hurt anyone. You know, if you hurt people and when you pass away, I know a lot of people are just like, as soon as someone dies, they're like, oh, he was such a good person, she was such a good person, because they just want to say that because they're dead. But also, if you're not a good person, people will just be like, oh, alhamdulillah, like that's a relief, like we don't got to deal with her anymore, you know. But if you're a good person, everyone is gonna mourn your death, and they're gonna feel your loss, and they're gonna make dua for you. So most important thing, obviously, pray your prayers, read Quran, and be a good person, be a genuinely good person. Don't hurt people's feelings, put yourself in other people's shoes, treat people the way you want to be treated, you know, don't have double standards. And in all of this, I'm upset because there are certain family members who, not my immediate family, but you know, family members who didn't even, you know, call my mom to give her, you know, condolences or even text me or anything like that. And you know, I don't want to make this video about them though, because they're not that important, you know. That might be another topic or video for another day, but this was really more to kind of commemorate my uncle and just remember everything about him, so I can have it in video form for myself, and also for the people who have been emailing me and asking about him and checking up on me. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry that this video is so long and I'm just rambling, and you know, my mind is all over the place and I just don't feel that great. But I wanted to make this video to update you all, because you guys are my virtual family. So please make dua for my uncle, make dua for my family, make dua for me, and may Allah reward you all and bless you with everything that you wanted and more. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum.